All right, we're going to talk about the FA Cup third round weekend in detail. We're going to just start with Manchester United first. Obviously, they're out. Lads, you were both at Old Trafford. Rob, I'll come to you first. What did you make of it? Is it just another... Have we seen this game before? Is it just another one in the catalogue of disappointments at Manchester United, or was there anything that stood out about this one this time?
Well, no, I mean, it is. United fans have seen this type of result millions of times over the last sort of 10 or 15 years. That when the final whistle went, there was some scattered boos, but not too many. It was almost like apathy. In the end, the United fans kind of sort of streamed out, having seen all this before. It is another low point, given that they've been knocked out of both domestic cup competitions at the first hurdle. Obviously, didn't get past Grimsby in the second round of the League Cup. They've lost in the third round of the FA Cup. It means that they're only going to play 40 games this season compared to 60 that they had last year. It's the lowest amount of games they're going to play in a full season for 111 years, I think, which tells you everything about where the club are at the moment. We spoke to Darren Fletcher afterwards, who kind of did his best to put some kind of positives on it, sort of saying, don't waste the season. There's a lot to play for. Well, there's not really. There isn't an awful lot to play for the rest of the season. They need to get into Europe somehow. Fletcher was at one point sort of saying, well, it's up to the players. The players need to find some kind of motivation because they need to show that they deserve to be at the club beyond the summer. But after that, the season is gone now. It's over, really. Arsenal, City will fight for the biggest trophies. Teams that United consider to be rivals, while United plod along in the hope that things can be fixed in the summer. That's where they're at the moment.
Mark, you were pitch size, which obviously gives you a different perspective. What do you make of the atmosphere before the game, your flash interview after the game? What was the day like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it is a recurring nightmare for United, isn't it? It seems like that every time we kind of got the cup ties, or every season there's a game like this, and this was no real surprise. But yeah, I was pitch side yesterday, and one thing that I just want to kind of mention is that United have kind of, I won't say they've surrendered the Stretford end to the fans. Well, basically, they've worked alongside the fans to help improve the atmosphere at United. And one element of that is that the fans don't want any music before the game. They want to build up the atmosphere themselves. And so there's even banners that say music is not atmosphere. Now, as I was pitch side pre-match, one thing that was really noticeable to me was the fact that the players are warming up in absolute silence. And it was, you couldn't even hear the music. Now, players shouldn't really need music to warm up. I'm not saying that, but they need a bit of an atmosphere. And the fans who are in the Stretford end, who are claiming to be the ones that are driving the atmosphere, were deathly silent if they're even there. I'm not sure if they're in the concourses, getting a pie or whatever, but one thing they have done, they've improved the visual aspects of the Stretford end. It's fantastic with all the banners, but they want the club to turn the music off so they can build up the atmosphere, and they're not building up the atmosphere. It's not good at all. So we all got different grounds across the country, and I think it is probably a theme across many grounds that the atmosphere isn't what it used to be. But at United right now, the atmosphere is so quiet before the game that it must have an effect on the players. They're going into the tunnel without any kind of adrenaline pumping through because there's nothing going on. There's no singing from the fans. There's no music from the tannoys. So it's like it's the worst of both worlds. There's nothing there. So I think the club should look at this scenario with the fans and say, look, you're not really helping the situation. If you want no music before the games, make some noise. If you're not going to make any noise, you're going to turn the music up because you need some atmosphere. You need the players to kind of go off the pitch thinking, yeah, we're pumped up and ready for the game. But I'm not making excuses for the team because they were pretty poor. They started pretty well. I think Diogo Dalot had a couple of chances the first 5 minutes where broke through the Brighton back line. Had he passed, United could have had an easy chance to score, but he didn't. And United didn't score. But, all in all, it was a game whereby as soon as they went behind, you felt, this is it. United are going to lose because they haven't got the players. I mean, whoever comes in, whether it's Michael Carrick, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, whoever, Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp could come in. That group of players is not good enough. And I do worry for United in the sense that they are wanting to get into Europe this season. They've got a good chance of finishing top 6, maybe even top 4. But the results in recent weeks have been so bad that you can't really say that having lost at home to Brighton, having failed to beat West Ham, having failed to beat Wolves, having failed to beat Burnley away, why should this group of players, under any manager, come close to qualifying for the Champions League? And the game against Brighton suggested to me that they're going to really struggle. Albeit, I've got to say, Mbeumo Ahmad will be back at the weekend, which is a big thing.
You mentioned Diogo Dalot there, your close personal friend. Obviously, they put him up for a flash interview afterwards with you. Just talk us through what he said and your reaction to his words, please.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, I think on this podcast I've been fairly critical of Diogo Dalot in the past. I've just said then he should have passed for a couple of chances in the first 5 minutes. So in fairness to him, he stood up. A lot of players, didn't show, but Diogo Dalot always shows up to, give his opinion after a game. And he felt that, it's difficult. He said United have had a difficult time recently. He doesn't know why the situation is as it is with constant churn of managers, but he put it on the players to deal with it and to rectify the situation themselves on the training pitch. Now, you can look at that two ways. It's just words. It's just excuses. And, we hear this a lot, don't we? We hear players constantly, United, saying, we must do better. We'll do it right on the training ground. And they haven't actually done it. But I will give him credit for the fact that he did show up. Other players haven't done that. So, listen, it's always a difficult one to do, isn't it? If you're the player that's doing a post-match interview after an FA Cup defeat at home, it's a hard one. And at least he manned up well, fronted up for it.
All right. Well, Rob, obviously the attention is now going to turn to who's next. It appears to be the old boys club back in town. It's Michael Carrick or Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. At the time they're recording this, all the indications are that it's going to be Michael Carrick. I guess firstly, obviously they've gone a different route to the last time they appointed an interim, which is where they went external. They got Ralph Rangnick in. He had some pretty frank things to say about the state of the club, which, let's be fair, have proved probably fairly accurate certainly in terms of what's happened since. Should we look at this decision to go for an ex-player as a sensible line of, following somebody who knows the club, who can try and re-establish some standards, or is it really a lack of originality, a lack of innovation that's going to just mean they're stagnating for another 3, 4, 5, 6 months until the summer, until they get someone in who can take them forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one because from the club's point of view, obviously, I don't think that they were ready to sack Ruben Amorim. The results were poor, but I think their intention had been to at least have him see out the season and then make a decision. Obviously, that's been accelerated by the fact that Ruben Amorim went public with a lot of his criticism of the club, and the club fell backed into a corner with how they handled that. So once you're in that position, you're then faced with a decision about whether to try and approach a permanent manager mid-season, like they did with Ruben Amorim the last time. That obviously didn't work out. Or put your foot on the ball, give yourself some time, appoint an interim until the summer, and then make a permanent choice at the end of the season. If you're going to go down that interim route, you're basically picking from a group of managers who are out of work, and there are not that many. So it's fairly obvious that you would go back to, old players, former players, people who have done the job before. Carrick has done the job before Rangnick for 3 games, I think. Obviously, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer did the same when Jose Mourinho was sacked. So it's the obvious choice. I can understand the logic behind an interim because it buys you time in your search for your next permanent manager. The danger is, though, that there will be a feeling that United are essentially writing the season off. And when they appointed Rangnick the last time, that when Rangnick came in, it was okay until they got knocked out of the Champions League. They lost to Atletico Madrid. And the minute that they lost to Atletico Madrid, the players obviously realised that Rangnick was going to be here. They didn't need to impress him. And the season spiralled to the point where it was just a disaster towards the end. That was in March in that season. The danger is now that an interim comes in. The players are all going to know that this interim is not going to be there beyond the end of the season. They don't have to impress him particularly. There's nothing really to play for. There's no trophy on the line. There is European football, but is that a massive motivation? Probably not. That the season really could spiral from this point, and they are in and around the European places now. I think they're 7th in the Premier League table. There is a danger that the players could just shrug their shoulders. The whole kind of mood around the club again is one of apathy. They don't really care. They're waiting. Everyone is waiting in this holding pattern until the summer, and the season spirals and it reaches new lows even from this point. So it's going to be a really, really tough job for whoever comes in to be caretaker, to be interim, whatever you want to call them, because the first job, as Mark said, the group of players isn't fantastic. The first job is to motivate that group of players and make them believe there is something left to play for the next 4.5 months of this season, because that is a long time to play football with no motivation. And there are an awful lot of teams in the Premier League who will have plenty of motivation, and United could find themselves, if they don't put their ideas up quickly, sliding down that table really quickly.
Mark, Rob's talking about a lack of motivation there, but I'm just looking at the Premier League table. They're 3 points behind Liverpool in 4th. And if we're saying that top 5 might get Champions League, they're 1 point behind Brentford at the moment. Now, I know they've got City and Arsenal next, and that table could look very different in 10 days, 2 weeks' time. But shouldn't they have motivation for the fact that they can get back in the Champions League and what that would mean for the next manager and for the future of the club and the ability to attract players and revenue and all of that? Is there not surely a galvanising factor there that they can get behind? Champions League football is within touching distance for them at the moment with 21 games played in the season.
Absolutely. I disagree, Rob, on that, and on the basis that you say that Champions League football is there to be grabbed. And, you know, a lot of those players might think, well, what does it matter to me because I'm not going to be here next season? That is an indictment of the kind of the mood around the club at the moment. But you're right. There is definitely something to play for. They can certainly redeem themselves after the last season, which was terrible. But, you know, for me, I think the big issue is the next 2 games for the interim manager when he comes in are Man City at home and Arsenal away. So there goes your managerial bounce straight away because I can't see him getting anything out of those 2 games. And if they lose those 2 games, then what have you got? You've got, I mean, what's the recent run been? It's been pretty bad as it is. So the mood will be even worse. And the new manager that comes in will be wanting to get some sort of uplift. And they're the 2 hardest games you could pick. So with that group of players, I don't see how it happens. I think one thing that is crucial for the owners or the club hierarchy to do is when the new manager comes in and they have to say to him, look, make a change in the squad. I think you have to get somebody out. You have to make a statement by saying to an Ugarte or a Xerxes, you've got to go because just to tell the rest of the squad, we are not going to put up with players who are not good enough for this club. Get one of those players out, bring somebody in just to freshen it up and say the standards have to be higher. We can't put up with this drifting through seasons as we have been doing. Make a change, show a bit of ruthlessness, but that's really hard if you're the interim coach because, as Rob said, the players know that in 6 months' time that coach will be gone and somebody else will come in. So United are in a really difficult situation. We're just getting back to the ex-player thing. It is kind of embarrassing that Man United constantly go back to ex-players. I mean, why are ex-players better qualified to take on this club than anybody else? You know, this so-called Man United DNA, this DNA has been terrible for the last 12, 13 years. And if you talk about players that played under Sir Alex Ferguson, the game has changed so much since Ferguson left in 2013. It already changed when it was changing when he left. That's one of the reasons he moved on because Pep Guardiola changed the way that the game was being played and Jurgen Klopp in Germany. So just think outside the box. And people say, well, yeah, they did that with Rangnick. Well, that wasn't the most obvious solution, a guy that hadn't coached for years and years. So they just make mistake after mistake after mistake in terms of managers and with players. You know, Ineos came in talking about how they're going to change things. 3 of their signings have been Patrick Dorgu, who's been not very good. Josh Xerxes has been terrible. And Manuel Ugarte has been even worse. So, you know, Rob will know this better. I'm sure that Man United, in between the takeover from the Glazers and the Ineos, they had an audit of all the transfers that the club had made in the last 5 or 6 years. And the verdict was United had wasted lots and lots of money and made some terrible signings. We're going to make it better, they said. Ugarte, Xerxes, Dorgu. There you go. There's the results.
Rob, I'm going to ask you a question and I want a one-word answer. Is Michael Carrick good enough to manage Manchester United in the long term?
He's been a politician because he has to face him every week at a press conference. That's unfair. I'll answer that question. I'll say, no, he's not. But
okay, so then my next question is, how important is it that they do not fall into the trap that they did when they appointed Solskjaer and they fell in love with it and they thought, actually, this is a good idea and we'll turn an interim into a longer-term appointment, and it proves to be a bit of a disaster?
I'll agree with that. I will agree with that because the whole point of giving yourself time to get the right guy in as a permanent manager, the whole point of this interim thing is so you make the right choice. You cannot get into an emotional situation where results with the interim they reach the point where there's a groundswell of opinion that he should take over, like what happened with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer the last time. I think you have to be really cold with how you look at the situation now, that the minute that the interim is appointed, that you then start doing a proper search for a permanent manager and pick the best guy to lead United for the next 3 or 4 years. If managers get that long anymore, they probably don't. But you know what I mean? They can't get into this situation where it's like, we'll just, test the water and throw Michael Carrick in, and if it goes well, maybe we'll see. Because I don't think that is the right way to go. And that is the danger with this interim situation, and particularly with ex-players, because there will be support if results go the other way. And I've just said that they could drop off a cliff, and I genuinely think that that's a possibility. But if it was to go the other way, whether it's Carrick or Solskjaer, whoever, particularly because they're an ex-player and the history they have with the club, there will be a lot of backing from fans for them to get the job permanently. I imagine that would have happened with Darren Fletcher as well if he'd been given the job until the end of the season, because of the way that the fans appreciate what these players have done for the club. I think the club in this instant have to be really, really cold with the way that they look at it. And if they think that Michael Carrick is the right guy now, then give him the job permanently now. Do not give him an interim job on the understanding that maybe we'll see. They have to give an interim job until the end of the season, start looking for a permanent manager, and then make the right choice with that manager.